Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is David Arnold. I'm one of the senior trainers here at Workamajig. Today's webinar is about send it to me, right? So we're going to talk about the setup and use of scheduled transactions and reports. Okay. Like I said, I have a poll set up just to kind of get some where you guys are at with scheduled transactions. That's what we'll talk about first, and then we'll go on to scheduled reports. Okay. If you have any questions, those can go into the Q&A area. You can ask questions, and once I get to them, when there's a break, I'll go ahead and get to those and answer your questions. The next thing we have is, again, if you have any further questions or needs, don't hesitate to contact us at support@workamajig.com, and we'd be happy to help you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So again, today's topic is about the scheduled transactions and report. The scheduling of items really falls into two categories. The financial one, which is usually these repetitive type of transactions that you create each week, month, yearly, whatever that is, right? But it has a definite general ledger effect. The other thing we're going to talk about that can be scheduled is reports. And so this allows you to send usually financial or production type reports to your team at specific times. And these can also go to outside people that are outside Workamajig. So usually that's management or something like that. Okay. So why would we, so let's first start with the financial. I think that's the easiest one to go with. And why would we schedule a transaction, right? And so again, this is usually because again, I'm doing this on a monthly basis. And of course, we can always copy it. And I think the most common one I see is a journal entry. So I have one that I've already created here. So I'm just going to go with this one. It's usually a payroll journal entry. Okay. And so again, I have this, when I do my payroll, it comes out of my bank, credits bank, and then usually it's debiting a number of accounts. And that could be salaries, payroll taxes, any, FICA, however you guys are tracking that in the general ledger. Again, this is not how you should do it per se, but again, I'm just saying, usually it's coming out of the bank, that salary, and then it's going to hit these different, expense or accrual accounts for you to deal with. Okay. Now, of course, each month, I could come in, open my old one and copy that, and that would give me, a new one, right? But far easier is actually to create a schedule, right? So again, each time I need this to show up, right, it's going to show up and then I can edit it accordingly. So let's take a look at that. So in any of these transactions, once I've created it, doesn't matter if it's posted or not, I'll see create a schedule. Okay, so more, create a schedule. I click on that and it brings me to this scheduling screen. The first thing I'm going to do is click on settings, and it's going to say, what is the frequency I need this to happen at? Okay, right? So again, is it weekly, every 2 weeks, monthly, something like that? I'm just going to say, sorry, a little from Japan, we only get paid once a month. So I'm just going to put in a monthly one. Okay. The next date. So again, I've already created my 7/1 transaction. So the next time I really need this to fire off would be, for example, 8/1, if that's the next time I'm going to make my monthly payment. Okay. How I'm going to set up the reminder is I'm going to actually have the system automatically create it for me. There is show a reminder, which will say, hey, we're going to create this transaction. You want us to create it? Yes, we do. I find that wide, but again, your mileage may vary in this case. So I usually say just automatically create it in the system. Okay. The number of remaining, how many times do I want this to repeat? Basically 99,000 times as it's going to go until forever. But some people would say, well, at the end of the year, I want to change it or something like that. It's really up to you on the number of remaining and depending on that type of transaction. Okay. The remind days, again, if it's created a day in advance or a couple days in advance, that's what this is doing. The next one is create as approved. Now, this is the one that's kind of, if you're the one creating it and you're the one approving it, does that make sense? Then I would probably check that box. But most of the time we're going to come in, we're just going to say, don't create it as approved. And so again, it will auto generate it. Then you'll have a chance to deal with it if it needs to be sent for approval. But again, a journal entry doesn't have an approval process in this case. So either way, it's checked or unchecked. It's not going to harm. But again, when we look at a client invoice, for example, we'll see something different. Okay. This active here is really saying that this schedule is active. I want this to occur every month for ad nauseum for the next 10 years or so to speak. And that's what it's going to do. The description here is just more to identify that when we look at these transactions. And I'll go ahead and save that. So again, setting the frequency, setting the next, that type of thing. Okay. Setting up when does it happen. And again, I usually set the reminder as it automatically create. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and save that. Right. Right. The next thing we can do, and this is where the please send it to me, is I can actually notify people when this transaction is created. So when I say, please notify the people, it can be either staff or contacts. Again, in this case, because it's usually general ledger transactions, we really don't let you send it out unless they are a contact or staff member, if that makes sense. Okay. So, and it would make sense that I'm sending a journal entry to my staff. And if you have your freelance, your CPA that needs to be involved, they would probably be in here as a contact. So you could send it to them if you needed to. Okay. And so again, you're selecting people off that you want to receive a notification that this transaction was created. Okay. I'm not going to add that in for mine. Okay. So what happens is next month, what I will see for a journal entry in this case is, again, you don't have to do this. The system will automatically generate this. I'm just showing you this so you can understand what the system does. And so when the system comes around on 8/1, it'll generate the payroll, this new payroll journal entry. And again, it's a carbon copy of what I had before. The number that it uses would be in line with the journal entries, right? So if you'd already created another 10 journal entries, then that next number would be that. So it's picking up the next number for your journal entry. So it stays in line. That's another reason to use a schedule instead of a copy. That makes sense. Okay. And this can be fully editable. I'll show you where that happens. And then again, just to show you once again what happens in the following month, again, the system will automatically generate it. And there it is. And again, it's dated because I said monthly. And so on the first of each month, really, it's starting to generate these. And again, the reference, which is the journal entry number, again, I didn't create any in between, but it accepts the next journal entry number. So again, it stays in line with your transactions. So you're not losing anything. Okay. Now, where would I see these? The reason I put them in as not being approved and enrolled, or sorry, and posted type of thing, is they are going to show up here, other than if you got a notification. I'm going to see these unposted transactions, and I'm going to see these journal entries, and here they are here. Sorry, I have a ton of them that I didn't do. Can you tell I've been training? Okay. And so again, I'm going to see these journal entries sitting in this area. I'm sorry, all my 11s. Sorry, that's too much. Yeah. I'll just set it to the first. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So again, it's just going to show up in my unposted transactions, right? And so then I can take a look at it. And again, the idea is that I can come into this next month. It's auto-generated for me, and I can adjust it accordingly. So maybe this month, the payroll actually was $1,500. And so that was an increase of instead of 1,400, this went up to 800 and everything else stayed the same type of thing. So as long as they balance, we're good to go. I post it. The next time it's generated, it's still using that $1,400 journal entry, if that makes sense. Okay. I see anything in the chat? Okay. If you have any questions, again, feel free to put those into the chat area. Okay. I think this is, again, pretty straightforward. Again, so that's the idea, is that for these items, again, they're auto-generated. we're still allowing you to edit them after the fact. So they've been created. I edit them accordingly and I post it and it's good to go as far as journal entries. Okay. If, for example, I hired a bunch of new people and now my payroll by the base is $1,500 instead of the $1,400 of the original, I can actually come up to more and say, make this record the new schedule master. So this one becomes the primary. So now moving forward with my schedule, it will create carbon copies of this $1,500 one instead of the $1,400 one. Okay. All right. So that has to do with kind of journaling. Like I said, this is probably the most common one I see that gets auto-generated. But we do have, let's take a look at some of the other financial transactions and would we use this as a scheduled transaction? So let's look at it from the purchasing standpoint. So of course we have two things that we have in purchasing, right? We have a vendor invoice and we have the payment. Okay. Now again, depending on what that transaction is, do I just use a payment? So if I go look at a payment, we go into here, purchasing payment, okay? And I know I can pay this. And so this might be a rental check, right? So I'm sorry, I'm just going to use a company, right? And I say, this is my check. It's for, I have to pay $2,500 a month. Yes, right? That doesn't make sense at all. And I go ahead and say, well, what does this go towards? This is my expense. I'm going to say, this actually goes to, sorry. So this expense it's actually going to go towards my rent. That makes sense. I might be tracking it. I think I tracked that. Okay, there's my rent. So again, the full 2,500 is going towards rent, if that makes sense. Okay, and I go ahead and save that. And this would be a payment that's ready for me to print out or, ACH it, however I get that done. But again, it's just tracking the rent. Okay. Uh, then I can come in and as you can see, I can create the schedule and do the same thing, right? Monthly payment, and it's going to be this. But as you can see, there's not a lot of information gained if I use the payment. So I do see people use the payment as the schedule, but some may decide, well, I need a lot more information in it. So they would go into a vendor invoice, have that vendor invoice, right? So let's go ahead and do new, and we can do the vendor invoice instead. Okay. And again, just picking a vendor and again, picking a number for it, right? Whatever that first number is, and I say next. Okay. As you can see, obviously I can put in a lot more information regarding this. It can still point to the same locations, but then I'm just grabbing this scheduled invoice. As you can see, I can schedule it. Okay. I'm grabbing this scheduled invoice and paying it each month. So there is that. It's really a matter of, how much information I need to go along with this. Do I store it as just a scheduled payment? Is it a journal entry, which also has kind of little information along with it? Or do I go for a vendor invoice, which will give me a lot of information that I can put with it as I replicate it? Okay. But now while we're here as a vendor invoice, I do have a kind of a caveat for this. Depending on how you're tracking your expenses, right? You may require obviously that it has an item, but you may have a setting that's saying it requires a task. And so do I make this overhead or not? That's another setting that can kind of override that. But if I'm going to schedule a vendor invoice and it's going against a project, again, does it make sense to create a scheduled invoice for a client project? And most of the times that's a no, right? Because usually the client project is not going to be open long enough for that to happen. Now, again, you may have like a year-long an annual maintenance project or something for that client, then sure, you can target this one. This vendor invoice will be expenses that are incurred, such as printing or something like that for that client. And so, sure, I can target that project and the task and the item that I'm purchasing from them. It might be, some sort of stock photography or something like that, whatever that is. Again, so I can get that to schedule out and appear every month or whatever that is. Make sense? Okay. So the next thing I would look at is, again, oftentimes from the client standpoint. Okay. So much like, so kind of switching gears a little bit, our next type of scheduled would be more, sorry, clicking the new. The next thing we'd be looking at is more from that billing side. And just like before, I could create a scheduled receipt, but that's taking into effect that the client is actually sending you a receipt on a monthly basis. And that usually doesn't happen, right? It may, but again, oftentimes that's not happening, right? So it's more common to have an invoice that's doing that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do an invoice. Again, do I target a project or not? Okay, now why would I schedule a client invoice? And so the most common thing I see for this is media. Maybe I have talked to some of you about media buys. I find it if you're using kind of our manual media or something like that, or even if you're integrated with, Freewheel or Strata, or using Gale Force or some other media purchasing uh, software, the idea is that usually you have a choice of pre-billing, which is taking the orders that you have, billing that amount to the client, and then kind of reconciling with the vendor invoices, and then giving back, or getting revision lines that you have to bill back to the client, as well as any new order plans, orders that you have in for that plan for that client. Um, I tend to find it far easier is if we just create an advance bill. Okay. So your media plan, for example, is $120,000, right? So let's go with that, right? So that sounds like, I know it's kind of low for a media buy. Let's say it's 120,000 for the entire year. So, but you're going to bill them out at $10,000 a month because that's going to make it easier for them to budget and schedule in their payments. You're guaranteed that they know $10,000 is going to come, and probably they'll pay that within 30, 60, 90 days, whichever your terms are. But you don't know what ran right at that point in time. So it makes it very easy to basically just wait for vendor invoices and recognize those to revenue, and then provide reporting to your client about what did run. Here's the plan, the plan's the plan, and that's fine. You can send that out to them. But again, as far as recognizing and billing, we're going to leave it as an advance bill. So for example, I'm going to come in and I may even put it towards a project because I have a year-long media project for them. And I'm going to check box advance bill. And how often do I want this? I want it for $10,000, right? Every month, and I'll get to scheduling that. And so I can go ahead and save. So this is my first line that gets created. It's saying $10,000, but maybe this is where I can kind of put in my plan. So I can say outdoor and put in any information that I want onto it, but I'm just going to say we're targeting outdoor, and that's going to be, $4,000 of our plan, right? It's going to be a little less than half of our plan. I'm going to do, radio and TV, right? And again, I can split these out as much as I want. And that's going to be, for example, another, $5,000. And now I need another 1,000. And that might be, again, interactive or something like that. And that'll be my 1,000. Okay. So again, not getting too heavy into this, but the idea is that, again, here's our plan. And so again, this is what we're kind of targeting. And again, that always shifts. I know media, it always shifts. Okay. So this gets approved as normal. I get my invoice. And then this is one that I'm going to definitely create a schedule for because we're going to do it monthly. So come in here, frequency, of course, monthly. I want this to appear at the first of every month, even though this is the 23rd. The next one I want to show up is on 8/1. The reminder is going to be automatically create. Create as approved. This is where it comes. This one actually do I approve it or not? Right. And so this is, again, I'm probably one I'm going to say don't create it as approved. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. Okay. So this is now going to start creating my invoices for me. Oh, sorry, forgot one, number remaining. This is a year plan. I have one. How many more do I need? I need 11 more. Okay. And I can go ahead and save that. Again, next month, what will happen? The system will automatically generate this, and there's my invoice right there. Okay. So let's kind of track this one through and what we do. So this one is going to be when I go to billing, right? So my billing people are dealing with those. It's going to actually be sitting here in the invoices to occur. So let me see the invoice date. Should get this on top. So third, let's see. Oh, I have a lot of gunk in here. Okay. So here's my invoice coming in. Again, it automatically comes in. It says it's waiting to be approved, right? So it's sitting here for me to basically open up and edit as needed, right? Again, in advance bill, this is just a bucket of money that I get to deal with. And again, we're not going to talk about, revenue recognition or anything like that. It's just more that I can get this invoice out there for your, and I can change it accordingly. So it's like, oh, okay, we're going to do more interactive. So the interactive, instead of being 1,000, we're going to do 3,000 of it because that seemed to do well. We're going to cut some of our outdoor. So that's back to 2,000, right? And then there we go. We're going to stay the same with radio, right? So again, we're kind of moving the money around for the client to see that we're moving it, but really in the system, we're still dealing with the same $10,000. Okay. So again, scheduling this makes it far easier to kind of deal with that media. And so that's a very common one to kind of set up. You may also have retainers. That's another use of this. A retainer in our system may be slightly different, right? So in ours, a retainer really says what's included in what I do for that project and what isn't. And what isn't included is considered an extra. But what we don't have is, okay, we put in copywriting that's included. Well, we don't care if you work 1 hour or 1,000 hours in that month, it's all included. So we'll just mark it all as billed. That makes sense? Whereas some would say, well, we bill them up to a point and anything over that would be considered an extra. So that's where I would probably schedule an invoice to be auto-generated as an advance bill. That will take care of that. Anything considered over, I then have a choice. Do I send them an extra invoice to show them you owe us more money? Right? Or do I mark it as billed, or do I write it off, or do I transfer it? Again, I can take care of those transactions and make a decision what to do with it during the billing cycle. Okay. But their standard pay me $10,000 a month as a retainer is retained, and that doesn't change. Okay. All right. So that is that. Let's see if again, that was kind of the financial. Are there any questions on, again, how I can kind of schedule that and send them out? And then what are my use cases for it? Okay. Guess everybody's pretty straightforward. Yeah, I believe it is that you guys have chat, but you don't have question and answer. Is it the other way around? I always think it's the questions. Okay. So looks like no questions. Again, let me see if we have any polls. Let me get my questions here. Now I'm just going to end the poll, so hopefully I can see the details here. Uh, no, it did not like to give me that. Okay. Let's see if I can get that again. Okay. Well, I guess I don't get any of the question answers because it's saying I can't see them. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. Let's first time I kind of tried that. Sorry about that. Looks like I'm not seeing the results. I'll look at these later and we kind of reply back to you guys if you left your email address. Uh, but it seems like about, for the scheduled transactions, about a third of you are using it and about 2/3 are not. I just want to see what you were using them for. Unfortunately, I can't see those answers. Okay. So anyway, so now we're going to kind of change gears here a little bit, and we're going to go to the scheduled reports. Okay. All right. So why would I schedule a report? Right. So usually this is I get results, right? But I need to send these results to a client. So now let me go ahead and stop that sharing. Go back, and I also have one for scheduled reports, again, just to get some information of how you guys are scheduling those reports. Thank you very much for taking part in that. So there's a new poll out there for scheduled reports. All right, so why would I use scheduled reports? Okay, so again, this is the way to send kind of the results of the reports to designated people at a designated time. Okay. So the most important thing or the most common thing I see is usually timesheet reports, to be honest. I'm going to go to everyone and report center. And I have some time analysis reports. I think I'm just going to say backup. I have one already set up. And I have this, for example, it's called timesheet backup with utilization. Just to let you know, if you guys have any, if you see this report and you're like, hey, I'd like that, just send a note to support asking for the uh, the custom report, and I'm happy to install that onto your site. Okay. So anyway, what does this one do? And I'll run it here after a second. But again, basically it's giving me the name, it's telling me the week that they're working, and then it's giving me Monday through Friday, and then it has some other calculations involved in it. And I'll go ahead and apply this and just run it. Hopefully it has there. So here's all my people. Here, I'll use John Arbuckle. And so it's telling me, in week one, here's the 12:30 to whatever. Again, it's giving me where did they work. And again, I can slice and dice this in a number of different ways. But again, I just have these other calculations in here. So uh, I need to send this report to somebody, right? Okay. So first off, though, I want to make sure that the filters are set properly. Okay. So I'm going to modify it. And when we send it out, one of the filters that doesn't work, again, I need to kind of hardwire the filters because the system will run for those filters. Okay, so I either hardwire it or prior to scheduling it, I'll set those filters up. Okay, the one thing you need to be aware of is, for example, this one, because it's a timesheet, it says username and it says any of, and again, it has a bunch of people. But the one thing you could not use in this is me, because that doesn't make sense when I'm scheduling a report. The system is just going to run the report. So in this case, who is me? Who is my office? Who is my department? Right? So that's the way it's running. So do not use that type of filter on a name. If you need it, well, again, we lock it to a certain people or a certain group of people, and then we'll schedule that particular report. Okay. The other caveat on here is the date. Okay. So again, if I set the date in this to be from January 1 to January 31 and I schedule it, it will always run it that way, right? No way around it. It'll always do that filter. So we recommend when there's a date involved that you pick the ones that are kind of, the nebulous ones. So for example, year to date, last month, yesterday, last week, right? Use these type of, these types of time filters to get what you want. So like I said, the most common one is show me all the time that was entered either last week or last month. Like I said, those are the most common ones I see, right? I wouldn't have next month in this one, but again, usually I see last month or last week. Okay. And then I'm going to schedule it accordingly, right? I know it's going to run for last week. So like I said, I hardwired that in, and then I know that this is going to be being sent out to each person or whoever I decide. Okay, does that make sense? And again, if you guys have any questions, Uh, now's the time, type them in there. Okay. So now that I have kind of those filters hardwired for some of them, but others I'm going to, it's okay to ask. So when I come in here to actually, say schedule, you notice that it doesn't say view scheduled reports, or it doesn't say create a schedule. And that's because, again, it's waiting for the setting of the filters. So in order to run a schedule or set up a scheduled report, we first have to set the filters. And so in this case, I'm not going to use the date work. That should always be, again, last week, last month, whatever that is. The username, this is where I'm going to have to set up one for each one. So for example, I want to send this off to David, right? So Dave Arnold is going to get this report and it's going to show his time, right? For last week, for example. Again, I didn't do that. I didn't make that change on here. But again, I go ahead and hit search. And so that's going to give me only David's. Oh, okay. David's not in there. So maybe I have to do uh, John Arbuckle. Okay. And go ahead and save them. Okay. So here's all of John's, time entries for the period that I described. Sorry, it's really big. Okay. But that's the idea is now that I've set that filter and done the search, now it changes and I can now, let me hit search. There. Oh, I hadn't memorized it. Sorry. That was it. So again, John Arbuckle, hit search. It was still in the editing phase. Okay. And so now that I've hit search, based upon the filters I have, which is search for John Arbuckle for last month, right? Now I can set up the schedule. Okay. So in this one, I'm going to again click on the schedule details, and this is going to allow me to name this. And this is quite important. Name it so we can see it in the future. And I know I ran this for John. So it's going to say timesheet backup by week. And I'm going to actually kind of edit this and say for J. Arbuckle, right? And I'm getting the same type of idea. Once I create the report and send it out, how long are we going to store it? And usually, again, store it for 20 days and then the link will go dead. Okay. When do I want this to run? So I want this to be weekly. So I'm going to say start, send it out for last week every Monday, right? Or I can actually send it out Sunday if that's what I want to do. But I'm going to say every Sunday, send this out, right? And then there we go. I'm going to say weekly. Okay. I'm going to say send it out on Monday. So again, it's going to start on the 29th. It's going to go out weekly. And then what's the range? I want this to go out forever. Or again, do I say end after X number of times, right? Do I do it once a year or something like that? Or do I say just end on some selected date? Okay, so again, this is kind of the setup. I always set up the schedule name to kind of give me an idea of what it is, and I'll show you why in just a second. The description is, again, more for my benefit. Scheduled report. Okay. And again, the timing of it. Sorry, there are a couple of other settings. I kind of went through the timing of it, but we also have this right here. So send no data report notifications. The idea of this one is just that if 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 it's blank, just like I got for David Arnold, right? That was blank, it would not send a report. It'd just be nothing sent that day. But if I say send no data, it actually sends an email saying, hey, there was no data. And that in itself might be an identifier to say, hey, you didn't turn in your timesheets last week because again, this is a timesheet backup. Okay. We can also send it out as a PDF or Excel. The most common I see is PDFs, but when we start talking about financial things, then that's where it usually gets sent out as an Excel or a CSV. Again, the Excel will look just like the PDF. The CSV, even though it'll probably open up in Excel anyway, but as you know, it flattens it, right? There's no groupings or anything when it's a CSV, right? So that would be the difference between sending it as Excel versus CSV. Excel is going to pretty much mirror the PDF when it gets created. So sometimes, the columns don't quite line up. The rows will line up, but sometimes the columns don't quite line up. And that's just, limitation of Excel and how we send out the data. We send it out, it works, but sometimes it decides to put one of the fields one over or leave a blank in between them or something like that. But again, the rows themselves would be fine. Okay. Just more of those groupings that kind of get a little messed up. So again, if you're using it for further data analysis or putting it into something else, then that's where the CSV would come in. Okay. So again, that's good. I almost select the recurrent. Oh, did I mess up that? Oh, selecting end date. Sorry. Is asking me to select an end date. I didn't realize I'd done that. Okay, so that's the schedule details there. But then we also say, who do we email it to? And this is where I can actually start to pick, again, people that I need to send it to, usually contacts, right? Contacts or staff members. Again, staff would be within Workamajig. If I pick a contact, they would be outside of Workamajig. That makes sense. Okay. And that is how I would schedule that. Now, again, there's not a trigger for this one. It actually just sends it out. Okay. So how do I see what's happening with it? That actually is going to be here. So when I go to Workamajig, Admin Manager, System Setup, under global list will be my scheduled reports. And this is going to show me every scheduled report in the system. And this is why I said, make sure it makes sense. So that's why I said timesheet backup for J Arbuckle. And this is what I do, right? So it's giving me everything. So when I click into it, it's going to provide me with that information. Okay. Now, again, this will get triggered on the particular date and time that you select. So every time it'll send it at 1:02, right? Because that's the time on the server in this case, right? So it'll always send it at 1 o'clock on July, right? Or on Monday at 1:02. Okay. Make sense? If you're no longer using this, don't need it anymore, you can always come in and say delete this schedule and that takes care of it. Once they're being sent out, here's what we see. So this is one I had set up before. Okay. You can see that it gets sent out. Let's see. I think I have this one. That one might have expired. Okay. So here's the ones, when I click on it, it'll actually open up that report. If I said to keep it, again, it's probably not saving it or it's trying to open up something else. Okay. I think that was one that, oh, I did not want to do that. Okay. Sorry about that. So sorry, admin system setup and global list and scheduled reports. Again, this is going to give me that list. And so once they've run, it's actually, I'm going to see those sitting here. And as long as they're still available in the system, they will open them up. And if I said PDF, it'll open as a PDF. These are already gone. I think I got some here. Okay. So I'm just looking for one that'll open up for me. Uh, those are already deleted. Okay. So here we go. So this was the report that got sent out. Okay. And again, I saved it as a PDF. And so that's, again, this is the report that they're getting. Again, whatever print parameters you put on the report, it would be there. Okay. Now, what does this also provide? Again, well, I did it in the custom reports, but this is also available for any of the views as well. So if I come into purchasing, for example, and I look at my orders list, right? If that makes sense, through by whatever my search criteria are, I hit search and we will see the new schedule report. Okay. The only one that's slightly different is more the finance one. So under accounting and here is, for example, the P&Ls. So if you need to send out the corporate P&L to somebody, again, this one works a little in advance. It's still looking at these defaults, and then when you hit new schedule, because generate is actually showing it. So whatever your filters are and you say new schedule, it will accept these filters right here without having to run it first. But that's only a few of these, like I said, the project P&L, the balance sheet, things like that. Those are ones that you don't have to run it first because the generate is actually going to show you on screen or as a PDF. So it's looking at the filters, and whatever they were set to, that's what it'll run it for. Okay. All right. So again, what would we use these for? Those scheduled reports. Like I said, the most common I see is kind of the timesheet backup or timesheet analysis type information. Another very common one is more the project related ones. Again, uh, I have some ones like, for example, I just have one project summary data or project items and services. So again, I have this report that's just it's giving me, here's the client, here's maybe the campaign or something like this. These are the expenses. Let me know what those are. Remove the zero one. So I just see a real trimmed down version of what they have. And again, send that report to me every Monday, every Friday, the first of the month, the 15th of the month, whatever that is. So again, it's more that kind of, you know, where are we at with certain things? Okay. All right. And that is all I really had. Right. So if you have again any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Just type them into the chat. You should see a little chat button and you can type in your questions there. Happy to answer. I'll give you a little bit if you want to put those in. If not, we can call it a day and return some of your time to you. If you have further questions or you have questions about how, doing the custom field or custom reports, things along that line, just let us know. Support at workamajig.com. If there's, just tell us what you're looking for. We're happy to create those for you. And then as far as scheduling, if you have any questions on that, again, support at workamajig.com. We'll be happy to chat with you and help you get started with scheduling those reports. Okay. Well, thank you guys very much. Truly appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day and see you in our next webinar. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye now.